Welcome to another session of weCONECT, where we explore the ideas, companies, and key players that continue to raise the bar in eDiscovery.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the eDiscovery channel. This is Tom O'Connor from lovely downtown, recovering from Hurricane Ida, New Orleans, where we actually feel lucky to be in as good a shape as we are compared to the rest of the of Southeast Louisiana outside of New Orleans, which is still devastated. Rocky, coming to us from Tel Aviv as always.
I'm over here in Tel Aviv. Yep.
Ducking and weaving the Israeli Secret Service still?
Still trying to avoid them as much as I can. So
Ian, we kid him every week because the latest prime minister of Israel lives just down the street from Rocky. So his street is awash with security. At least that's his story. I don't know.
And just to make things fun, he decided not to move to like the Israeli White House.
Right.
So it's actually living a couple doors down, and so it's good times over here. So this week the excitement was they cut off all our power and internet for like 6 hours. We don't know what they were doing, but yeah, you might be listening to this call. So
went to DEFCON 1, or they were installing a new cloud in the neighborhood, right?
Yeah, something like that. So all good.
Well, we are really pleased to have with us today a person I've known for more years than I will admit to. Both of us had bright red hair when we met. This is Ian Campbell, who is the founder, CEO, chief cook, and bottle washer of iCONECT. Is there anything at iCONECT you don't do, Ian?
Yeah, I certainly don't code, and we have really smart people for that. But I have lots of ideas. I'm always thrown into the ring.
There you go. You're the idea guy. Just keep thinking, Butch. That's what you're good at, right?
That's right.
So before we start with the formal questions, I got to ask. A lot of people in their office have like trophies and awards and certificates and diplomas. Can you tell us what those things are up on the shelf behind you?
I recognize one of them.
I think one of them is a Knob Creek a bourbon. We're saving that for. Yeah, I think we're saving that for a special day. I will actually. I'm going to grab my camera for a second and move over here and show you that that's actually on my wall, which is 4 pictures of the Twin Towers, and
wow.
And that was actually from a calendar that I purchased. I guess over 20 years ago, and when I found it, it was a little outdated. But I thought, you know what, I'm going to put that up to show me that things can change any day, and we're all blessed to be here, and so people ask, why have you got 4 pictures of the Twin Towers on your wall? And it's a constant reminder to me to be very thankful for where I'm at and what I'm doing. So.
Rocky, you notice how he deftly dodged answering the question? You should have been a politician. You sound like the president at a press conference. I'm just looking to segue over to like, look at never mind the man.
I got to see what else is back up there. Oh, you know what? There's actually, hang on, I'll show you what else is here.
Bobblehead. Okay.
Soccer player. Is that you?
Certainly.
That's actually an Ian bobblehead that I got, and I'll show you kind of. It's actually not bad.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's actually not bad.
I like it.
So,
but yeah, I actually own a soccer club, so I've got lots and lots of soccer memorabilia in and around my office, in and around my house. So.
We were talking before we went live. Your club is. I noticed you said soccer and not football, so it's not to confuse our U.S. listeners, right?
Right.
That's right.
He knows how to talk to the general population.
That's right. Your club is Tottenham, you said?
Yeah, that in EPL. Yeah, I certainly follow Tottenham. Been to a few games there, as I've mentioned, with Graham Smith, formerly of Live Note, now with Opus 2. So it's we've always had fun at those games, and and again, we'll see how they make out this year. They've had a great run at the beginning, and then they had a hard weekend. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, as I said also earlier, you deserve a special certificate on the wall up there for surviving an evening with Graham Smith.
Touche.
Yeah, but I think we need to avoid talking about any sports in this one because we're coming off a rough NFL weekend for
not for the New Orleans Saints. We came off a very good weekend. Thank you. This will all change next week. You know, they've even added a game this year just to prolong our misery. You know, God. So Ian, here's the thing: as Rocky said, we like to, you know, kind of let people get a sense of who some of the folks in the profession are. Tell us how you got started in this crazy business. I mean, I mentioned you're Canadian. You're coming to us from Toronto.
Yeah, just outside Toronto. Yeah, and it's going to be hot today. It's going to be like, I don't know, 85, 86, something like that. But hot for us. But lots and lots of thunderstorms last couple weeks. Been right. I think we're getting the remnants of what you've been dealing with down there. So
yeah. And how did you get into our wacky business?
Yeah, because how long have you been at iCONECT, I guess?
I started a company called Interlaw in 1999. iCONECT sold its first system in March of 2000, right after Legal Tech. We demoed it a couple of times at Legal Tech in 2000, and it went from there. But I'd been sort of involved in, I was a concordance trainer, was a LiveNote trainer. I got to travel the world. I've been doing those things in the late 90s. But how I kind of got into it was I was doing LiveNote training. I have an advertising background. I'm an industrial design engineer. So I've always been in and around lots of graphics and lots of workflows and making things comfortable for people. And I was working on concordance training for a client, and in Toronto, actually. And it was a Red Cross case. And they said, well, how do we get to this information from 18 different locations across the country? Because we got all this data in Toronto, but we need to get to it from Vancouver and Montreal. And I said, I don't know, leave it with me. And my brother was a C++ programmer. And they had just built a highway in Toronto where they scanned your license plates. And he was working on that project full-time, but part-time. I said, hey, can you give me a hand with this? Is there a way to layer the internet on top of the database? And at the time, Concordance, some of your listeners may remember, had a DLL, and we licensed the DLL and we started playing with it, and we effectively built a web front end for Concordance. So this was in late '99, and I took it to the ownership group at Dataflight Software in California, and got them on the phone, showed it to them, and said, do you think this is, of interest to you? And they said, you know what, it's not really our sweet spot. This whole internet thing's pretty new, but if you want to do it, you go ahead.
Yeah, that's not going to go.
So we did, and it went from there. And at the time, one of the people at Dataflight, Cindy Williams, she joined me because she had a really strong relationship with. She had a great relationship with all of sort of the vendors, and we went on our bike to go and talk to anybody who had a copy of Concordance. And so we continued that till around 2003, 2004. At that point, we flipped over into Oracle as a backend because Oracle had a very strong search engine, and we were getting more and more requests from corporate clients saying, can I run it against my own data instead of just my litigation data? And so we built a layer which allowed iCONECT then to be a web front end for Oracle. That changed over to SQL in 2008. And it just continued from there. I mean, and I've always been very much of the evangelist and the idea guy. I've got reams and reams of paper sitting in my office of sketches and ideas and ways to kind of look over the horizon. Some of them fly, some of them don't. They always say that if you've got ideas, either run with them or kill them early. And right. And so we do that. We've got a whole kind of vetting process that when we have a good idea for a feature or an enhancement to the platform, we run it through a bit of a screening, and a lot of the ideas never make it their way into code because we just can't figure out how to monetize it. We can't figure out how to roll it out. It's going to impact too many other areas of the platform. So we're always looking for ways to bring value, but it's a struggle. I'll be honest with you. I'm digressing from your question here. It's a bit of a struggle as a software development company because you've got our existing clients who want faster, smarter, stronger. And then you've got new prospect clients who are always looking at the competitive landscape and they're always asking for things you don't have yet.
Right.
And
why can't you do that thing that Acme software does?
Right. But even further to that, we try to look over the horizon and develop things that people aren't even asking for, because we want to have those things that are quite unique. I mean, we've got thumbnail mode, and we've got the ability to switch the language of your interface, and those are things that are very commonplace in other regular generic software programs, where they're quite unique in eDiscovery. And so we kind of thought about those things. Automated redaction was something we were working on 3 or 4 years ago before anybody had it. So it's one of those things that it's always that struggle back and forth of, do you optimize for your current client base, or are you really focused on features? And so I'm the idea guy. I'm always pushing dev with new ideas and new ways to kind of reinvent the software. And that's where we are today. So again, to answer your question, I started really in the eDiscovery business around '99. Prior to that, I was doing concordance and live note training in the late '90s. iCONECT kicked off in 2000. We've never looked back. And Cindy left. Go ahead.
How did you actually get into legal to begin with?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, sure.
How did you go from whatever college you went to in advertising into this?
Well, a friend of mine in around '94, I'd been in advertising for years. I'd run my own company in advertising. We got caught in the crossfire of Macintosh computers, which was the first WYSIWYG computer where people could see it themselves on screen, and laser printers. And so we had a business where we were doing things like the top 40 song sheet for the local radio station, and price lists for plumbing companies.
And I'm sorry, this is all in Toronto?
Yeah, correct. And all of a sudden they could do it themselves. They went and bought a Mac and a laser printer. And so, and we saw we started to see a lot of our bread and butter accounts were kind of doing it themselves. And of course, at the time, early Macintosh computers, there was a new Mac coming out like every 3 months, right? And so we were leasing equipment, and 6 months later, it was old archaic equipment, and we needed to upgrade, because now it was color, and then it was, and then PageMaker came out, and Quark Express, and all those other sort of graphic design programs. So it was the time to get out of advertising, and we did, or I did. And a friend of mine had a computer company, and they were doing networks for law firms. And so they were doing Cat5 cabling and Token Ring, which was the other one that was around back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
And it was out. Novell 5.1 was out at the time, and so we were running networks and doing things for law firms, and that got me into a friend of mine said, hey, there's a big show down in New York, you should go check it out, because there's even more toys in our industry you've never even seen before. So I went to my first legal tech, I think it would have been '95, and I'll actually remember the very first the night I was there. I got there the night before the show, and I didn't really know anybody, so my two brothers came down with me, and we were walking to Carmine's, which is on 50, maybe 48, somewhere around there, around Broadway. And we went by the NBC store, and there was a signed Seinfeld script. But it was expensive. It was like $250, and I didn't have $250. So it was like, do I, don't I? No, I'm not going to do it. Then we talked about it at dinner, and I said, let's go back and buy it. And went back, and the store was closed. And then I was at the show, and then I was back in my car, and I was driving back to Canada. So unfortunately, to this day, my experience of my very first legal tech was, oh yeah, that's the show I didn't buy the signed Seinfeld script. So but no, at legal tech, I kind of wandered around and went, oh, look, a dongle for a photocopier. I know Summation was out then, Concordance was out then, Live Note was a big player, Case Central had just hit the market. So these were all, I was like a starry-eyed child walking around legal tech. And and again, that's where I met Cindy, and we sort of formed a bond from there. And she eventually joined the company and then left in 2014. But overall, that was my foot in the door. So I became a concordance trainer, became a live note trainer, traveled the world doing that as we were doing networks for law firms. And then in '99, I decided to go out on my own with the relationship with Concordance, and we invented iCONECT, and it went from there.
Cool.
That's cool. So, it's funny. Talking about like going to your first show, and it's almost like going to your first rock concert, right? It's not quite the same. I'd still rather go see some live music, but I think it's something that really is eye-opening for a lot of people, and especially back then. How many people were there? Probably were there even 1,000 people at the show? I mean,
you know what? ILTA hadn't started. That was LawNet was the other show that was around at that point. It was in San Francisco, and so LawNet and Legal Tech were one too. I mean, last year would have been the one that got canceled. Would have been my 25th Legal Tech.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
And most of it was spent probably standing in that breezeway between the second and third floors.
That's right. Well, the funny story. So the one year they kind of Hilton kind of screwed up the maps a little bit, and we thought we were getting a booth that was right at the top of the stairs where the coffee guy always is, and it turned out that we weren't. We were getting one kind of around the door, and we were like, that's not right. That's not what your map showed. And they kind of agreed. They said, yeah, you're right. And we went, what about this big hallway here? How about we just set up in there instead? And in order to avoid confrontation, they went, sure, just go ahead and do that.
Whatever.
So we were whatever, just go do it. So we did. We set up. Our booth was, I think, only like 5 feet wide, but it was long. It was like 20, 30 feet long. And so we were there for probably 4 or 5 years until evidently the fire marshal came along and said, whoa, wait a minute. If there's a problem, you guys are blocking the breezeway. Get out. So the following year, we were told we could no longer be in the breezeway. But we were in that breezeway probably for 3 or 4 years.
Got it. Now, speaking of conferences, iCONECT actually for a while was running your own user conference as well, right?
Yeah.
How many years did you guys do that?
Oh, I'm going to say 5, maybe 5, and we had some good ones. We put everybody on a cruise boat out of Galveston down to Mexico. That was a fun one. We brought in Lewis Black, the comedian. That was a little off color, but it was great. It was really funny. I can't even tell you his opening joke because it I'm sure half your listeners will hang up. But it was. I remember looking over at Browning Marie and Linda Alele, who was at O'Melveny at the time, and wondering if they were laughing or if they were going to walk out, because it was really, really edgy stuff, and they were laughing. I mean, it was fantastic. So, we also had from The Amazing Race, whose name escapes me right now, will come to me, the guy who's the host of The Amazing Race, and we actually did an Amazing Race iCONECT conference in Palm Springs. And it was great. We had a real fun time there, and again, lots of fun, but also lots of education.
And did Mark Tamaga come down and run like 400 miles to help with that, or?
No, it was good. But you had to dive to the bottom of the pool and get golf balls and spell a word, and you had to.
Tamaga. I don't know if you know Mark. He's at Growlings in Toronto.
Okay.
And he's one of those. He's one of those super. Run. I don't know what they call them, but they don't just do a marathon. They like run through the Gobi Desert, and then they bicycle, from Paris to Moscow. And he competes in those things. He's crazy.
Perfect. Well, we had a rock wall. We had all kinds of fun stuff there, and it was good. I mean, to be frank, what happened though around 2000, I'm going to say 10, 11, as you guys know, the banking crisis hit. A lot of cases got settled. I remember a lot of our vendors just didn't have projects because they were all settling out. Mm-hmm. And we were no different. I mean, the flip side to that was that when the FDIC came along and started doing all the banking investigations, we ended up teaming up with Lockheed Martin, and we did that project. So that was in our world the largest project we've ever done. It was there were about 970 banks went bankrupt. 19,000 bank branches that needed to be investigated. And Lockheed had what they called extraction teams, and they would go in, they would fire up the computers, they would extract all the information, they would wipe the hard drives, and they'd hand the keys back to the landlord. And they brought all that data back to Rockville, Maryland, and started dropping it into an iCONECT system. So by the time we were done, there were 44 billion pages of information sitting in iCONECT, 1.6 petabytes, spread across 19,000 databases, and to this, probably 450 users. So to this day, I'm not aware of a project that really ever got that big. And
I'm laughing
and we ran that
because
for a long time.
I was involved on the defense side. A firm in New Orleans represented a smaller bank down here, which was one of the targets of the investigation. And when it came for production time, they at the meet and confer, they offered us the database, and I said, I want the native files. I want to see the exact files that you copied off of those computers, because I know you did. Long story short, they couldn't find them. The FDIC could not find them. The FBI, of course, who had gone in and seized them and done the mirrors, they had an evidence chain up the wazoo. They could tell you the color suit the guy was wearing who did the mirror of the computer, but they could not find them, and we won. We won right. Basically on a default. We won on penalty kicks, right? They literally could not. There were, like you said, Ian, there were so many. I just had this vision of a Raiders of the Lost Ark warehouse where they had their originals, and they after 6 months they could not produce the original mirror images. And I said to my guy, you should move to dismiss. This is, I mean, it's kind of chicken shit, if you pardon the phrase, but it's a clear violation of the federal rules. And if they don't have the original data, how do they verify that the database they're giving us is accurate? They're using that crazy Canadian company.
I hear you. I hear you.
They're going to give us, It was funny. Like you said, it was so massive. It was almost beyond belief. And I'm sure that somebody. So what happened around that time is that we decided to kind of hold our cards closer to our chest. We didn't do the conference the following year, and then the things kind of changed a little bit. The market kind of changed. Other players started to come in and take market share, and so we took a step back from that. But at the time, it was a lot of fun. Yeah. So I'm curious. Do you see something similar going on now? After a year and a half of COVID and canceled conferences, are people taking and by people I mean vendors in the vendor community, are you taking a second look at doing shows? I wonder how many of these conferences are going to be able to rebound next year.
I don't know. I mean, to be frank, we didn't do ILTA, where our name is in the ring for legal tech, so we'll see where we're at in a few months to make that decision. But I think it's interesting in COVID. The one thing we're finding is that people are very curious. People are very, very open to finding out what else is out there, and I think that's a good thing. They're investigating a lot of new technologies. They're wondering if what they're using currently is the right thing to be using. So from our perspective, we've done more demos of the iCONECT platform in the last year and a half than we've done in the last 5 years. I mean, and maybe it's because people were sitting at home going, hey, I've got an hour to kill.
Now, kind of.
Oh, maybe I'll go watch a demo. So that's really good. And our pipeline is probably 5x what it was in January of 2020.
Wow.
However, with that said, people are risk averse, and people are a little hesitant to be making technology decisions when they're sitting at home, and I think that's been one of the challenges, is that we've found a ton of interest out there in the market, but when it comes to actually signing on the dotted line, people are a little risk averse these days, and I don't know when that changes, but when it does, it's going to be a tsunami, which is really good. But I think we're getting close.
I hope so, because my business is falling off the table. I'm waiting to surf that tsunami, man.
So Ian, let me ask you. Having most of the people who we have, unless they've worked for a law firm, in our industry tend to jump around a bit and haven't been in a single place for 20 years or so. Having been in the same company, same role, really. I mean, obviously it's grown and you've taken over the dishwashing or whatever you needed to do at any given time. But what have you seen really in terms of things that have truly shifted, that like really changed the way that you think about your business and the way that you think about how eDiscovery is run over the course of the 20 years at iCONECT.
Hey,
Yeah,
before you answer that, Ian, let me just interrupt. Rocky, are you picking up any of the ambient noise from the trucks outside here? We've got a lot of. Okay.
Nope.
Good.
All good, at least on my end. So.
All right. Sorry, Ian.
Yeah, no worries. I think there's been a shift. I think in the mid 2000s we saw everything go from paper to electronic. Email hit us like a tsunami, and even today, the amount of email, the amount of digital data being produced. I mean, when you read report after report, every one of them has a zero and a new word of a zettabyte or whatever. That it just keeps getting bigger. I think with that said, there are companies who are now having to use your phrase, an oh shit moment, when they go, wait a minute, I've got that stuff from 10 years ago. What do I do with that? Because that's still relevant, and it's either sitting in boxes or it's sitting in electronic or digital format, and they're kind of going, do I keep it forever? Like, what if there's something good in there? Like, then there's regulatory compliance issues, but I think more importantly, people don't know what they don't know, and I think that's the challenge. They look at stuff, and that's anyone from looking at an Iron Mountain and some of the storage companies that they're sitting on boxes and boxes of paper. People who have a cloud where they signed up for a cloud, but it's just kind of I'll call it kind of a dumb cloud. It's just data sitting in a location, and there's no intelligence to it. So we're getting more and more requests. You talk about sort of the change. We're getting more and more requests for people who want to unarchive that data. They want to get rid of the rot, which is the redundant, obsolete, and trivial data, which is in that, so that what they're keeping, what they're paying to keep, either digitally or on shelving, is in fact the stuff that is important. And I think that's an entire process that is going to continue over the course of the next number of years as people look not back to mid 2000s, but back just a little before that and go, if I got anything from the 90s here, and there's some great tools to be able to look at the content within it, to look at the metadata of the content, to look at the box profile, let's say, and make some good pragmatic decisions of what I should keep and what I shouldn't. And I think that's probably the next challenge that's out there, is because let's face it, I mean, I've got boxes of stuff here in my office. I've got CDs that have things on them from the mid 90s. I'm kind of going, do I throw it out? I guess I should throw it out. But I don't. I'm a bit of a pack rat that way. So and I think that's just me. Go and take some of the larger Fortune 500 companies and look at the kind of challenges they have. And I think there's companies out there are starting to look at that and address that in a very pragmatic way. And that's just the legacy stuff. That doesn't even include the stuff that's being generated every single day, which is being added to the legacy stuff.
Right.
And I think so I think that's a bit of a paradigm shift that started about 2 or 3 years ago, where people kind of had that, oh my goodness moment.
The little bit more of a focus on the data governance side, on the, what do I actually have? And I think part of that, you mentioned there's a lot of good tools out there now that weren't available even 5 years ago.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of the analytics tools that maybe were developed for eDiscovery initially, or for something else, and got their main use in eDiscovery. Now all of a sudden people are realizing, hey, I can actually use this to get a better understanding of my data. And yeah, it's a great point in terms of that shift of mindset. I think also